The medal and the truth. The day I came home from Afghanistan with the Distinguished Service Medal pinned to my chest should have been the greatest day of my life. It wasn't. It became the day that tore everything I had ever known apart and exposed secrets so dark, so deeply buried within the walls of my own family, that a federal courtroom would eventually need 4 hours just to read them all aloud. My name is Lisa Carter. I am a United States Army captain. And this is the story of how the family that raised me tried to destroy me and how the truth finally burned them to the ground. The airport smelled like jet fuel and fast food and freedom. I had been gone 19 months. 19 months of desert heat, mortar fire, encrypted communications, and the kind of silence that only exists when you are waiting to find out if the next breath will be your last. I had led a 12-person intelligence unit through 3 classified operations in the Kandahar province. I had carried wounded soldiers on my back. I had decoded enemy communications that saved an estimated 43 American lives. The Pentagon had acknowledged it with a medal. I pressed my hand against the cool metal of it as my taxi pulled up to my childhood home in Clarksburg, Maryland. A modest 2-story colonial with white shutters and a flagpole in the front yard that my father, Colonel Raymond Carter, retired, had installed the year I was born. He always said the flag meant something. I was about to find out. He had never believed that. My mother, Patricia, opened the door before I could knock. She looked older, thinner. Her smile was tight, not the warm, full smile I had stored in my memory during the dark nights overseas. Something flickered behind her eyes that I could not immediately name. "Lisa," she said. She pulled me into a hug that lasted exactly 2 seconds. "You look tired." "I am great, Mom," I said. I pulled back and searched her face. "Where is Dad? Where is Marcus?" "In the living room," she said, stepping aside. "They have been waiting." I should have noticed the tension in those words. Not "they cannot wait to see you," not "they are so proud," just waiting. Like I was a complication they had agreed to deal with together. My father stood near the fireplace with his arms crossed. Raymond Carter was 61 years old, broad-shouldered, with silver hair cut military precise and eyes the color of cold steel. He had spent 30 years in the Army. He had taught me to shoot, to march, to never show weakness, to serve something larger than yourself. He looked at me the way you look at a stranger who has walked into the wrong house. My brother Marcus was seated on the couch, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. He was 34, 3 years older than me, and he had never served a day in uniform. He ran a private real estate investment firm that my father had quietly funded for years. He had my father's jaw and my mother's charm, and absolutely none of either of their better qualities. He was not smiling. "Welcome home," my father said. His voice carried zero warmth. I stood in the center of the room I had grown up in, surrounded by photographs of myself in uniform at every stage of my career, and I felt something cold move through me. "Thank you," I said carefully. "It is good to be home." Marcus stood up slowly. He walked toward me with a strange deliberateness, like a man who had already made a decision he had been rehearsing for weeks. "Must feel good," he said, "coming home a hero." I do not know what I heard in his voice. Contempt maybe, something uglier underneath it. "Marcus," I said, "I just got here." "Yeah," he said, "you did." And then he hit me. Not a shove, not a push. A closed fist, full force, directly to the side of my face. The impact was so sudden and so violent that my legs simply stopped working. I heard my mother gasp. I heard something crack, though I would later learn it was not bone but the corner of the side table I struck on my way down. The floor rushed up and the room tilted sideways, and then everything went dark and quiet. The last thing I saw before I lost consciousness was my father. He had not moved from the fireplace. He was still standing there with his arms crossed. I woke up in the hospital 41 hours later. The room was white and smelled like antiseptic and something floral that turned out to be a small arrangement of carnations on the windowsill. A nurse named Donna told me I had a severe concussion, a fractured orbital socket, and bruised ribs from the fall. She told me the police had been contacted. She told me I had been brought in by ambulance after a neighbor walking her dog had seen me through the open front door and called 911. Not my mother. Not my father. A stranger with a dog. My father arrived at the hospital 6 hours after I woke up. He came alone. He sat in the chair beside my bed and he looked at me with those cold steel eyes and he said, with a voice completely free of hesitation, that I had deserved it. I deserved it. I lay there with my face wrapped and my head throbbing and a medal I had bled for sitting in a bag in the corner of the room. And I asked him very quietly what I had done to deserve it. He stood up without answering and walked out of the room. It would be 11 days before I understood. I was discharged from the hospital on a Tuesday. I had nowhere to go that felt safe, so I checked into a hotel near Fort Meade and I sat on the edge of the bed and I tried to reconstruct what I had missed. 19 months away. 19 months in which I had sent money home regularly because my mother had told me my father's pension adjustments had created financial difficulty. 19 months in which Marcus had texted me sporadically with short, careful messages that now, looking back, contained nothing real. 19 months in which my father had called me exactly 4 times, and each call had lasted under 6 minutes. I had told myself they were just not phone people. I had told myself they were proud even if they were not expressive. I had told myself that home was home, and that the distance was just distance. I began making calls of my own. I called my father's former financial advisor, a man named Gerald who had worked with the Carter family for 20 years, and who answered my call with a long, uncomfortable silence before saying, "Lisa, I am sorry. I cannot discuss anything related to your father's accounts." I called my mother's sister, my Aunt Renee, who lived in Delaware and who had always been the family member most likely to tell the truth. She answered immediately and said, "Oh, thank God," and then told me to come to Delaware right now. I drove to Delaware that same night. What Renee told me across her kitchen table, with 2 cups of coffee going cold between us and her hands, shaking slightly as she spoke, rearranged every assumption I had built my understanding of my family upon. While I had been deployed, Marcus had gone to my father with a business deal, a real estate acquisition involving 3 commercial properties in the DC corridor. He needed capital. My father had given it to him, not from savings, but from a joint account that included a trust fund established by my maternal grandfather specifically for me, designated in the original legal documents for my education, housing, and professional development. My father was listed as trustee. He had authorized the transfer without my knowledge. The deal had failed within 8 months. The properties had been over-leveraged against a falsified appraisal. The investors, including my father using my money, had lost nearly everything. The falsified appraisals were Marcus's doing. The authorization of my trust funds was my father's doing. And when a preliminary inquiry began through a real estate regulatory board, Marcus had apparently decided that the simplest solution was to establish, in advance, that I was unstable, volatile, and not to be trusted or believed. He had spent months quietly telling family friends, neighbors, and extended relatives that I had been struggling psychologically from my deployments, that I had become erratic in my communications, that they were worried about me. He had been building a narrative, so that when I came home and started asking questions, there would already be an answer in place. She is not well. She never was. She has always been difficult. The punch was not rage. It was strategy. If I was hospitalized following a violent altercation that he could later characterize as mutual, if my mental state could be questioned, if my father backed his account and my mother stayed silent, then anything I said about missing money or fraudulent transfers could be framed as the paranoid accusations of a damaged veteran with a grudge. I sat in my aunt's kitchen until 2 a.m. Then I called my attorney. The legal process took 7 months. I will not pretend it was clean or simple, or that justice moved with the satisfying swiftness of a courtroom drama. It did not. There were delays and motions and countersuits, and a period of approximately 6 weeks during which Marcus's attorney attempted to introduce my psychological evaluations from a voluntary post-deployment counseling session as evidence of instability. The judge rejected it in under 4 minutes. What the discovery process uncovered went beyond what even Renee had known. The trust fund manipulation was documented. The wire transfers were time-stamped and traceable. The falsified appraisals were tied directly to a property management company that Marcus had secretly co-owned through a shell entity. 2 other investors, both retired military officers who had trusted Raymond Carter's endorsement, had also lost significant sums. A forensic accountant hired by my legal team produced a 112-page report. My father's attorney requested 3 continuances. The DA's office opened a parallel criminal investigation. My mother, Patricia Carter, hired her own separate attorney in month 4. She filed for divorce in month 5. In month 6, she submitted a sworn statement that she had been aware of the trust fund transfers and had been told by my father that I had been informed and had consented. She had believed him, or she had chosen to believe him. I spent a long time deciding which of those I thought was true. I still have not fully decided. The civil trial lasted 9 days. On the morning of the 4th day, when the forensic accountant took the stand and walked the courtroom through the wire transfer records with the calm precision of someone reading a grocery list, I watched my father's face from across the room. He had aged 10 years in 7 months. The military posture was still there, the squared shoulders and the lifted chin, but something behind his eyes had collapsed. He looked like a man standing in the wreckage of an identity he had spent 6 decades constructing and discovering that without the costume there was almost nothing underneath. Marcus looked at the table the entire time. On the 7th day, Marcus's attorney approached my legal team about a settlement. We declined. On the 9th day, the jury deliberated for 3 hours and 40 minutes. The verdict awarded me full restitution of the trust fund value plus damages. A separate judgment in favor of the 2 other defrauded investors was entered simultaneously. Criminal charges against Marcus included wire fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and filing false financial instruments. He was sentenced 8 months after the trial concluded to 6 years in federal prison. My father was not criminally charged. The DA determined his role, while legally actionable in civil terms, did not meet the threshold for criminal prosecution without evidence he knowingly participated in the falsified appraisals rather than simply authorizing fund transfers he had legal trustee access to. He lost the civil judgment. He lost the house in the divorce settlement. He lost the investment my grandfather had built. He lost the respect of every military colleague who had watched the trial coverage. He lost his son to a federal prison. He lost me long before any of that. I stood outside the courthouse on the last day with the late afternoon sun cutting low across the parking lot and my attorney shaking my hand and reporters waiting at the bottom of the steps. And I thought about the 19 months I had spent in Kandahar. I thought about the soldiers I had brought home safely. I thought about the 43 lives the intelligence work had protected. I thought about the medal sitting on a shelf in my hotel room because I had not yet found a permanent home to put it in. I thought about the fact that I had survived actual war. And then I had come home and survived something worse. My mother called me 3 weeks after the trial. It was a Sunday morning, and I was at a coffee shop near my new apartment in Alexandria, and her name appeared on my phone screen, and I sat with it for 4 rings before I answered. She did not apologize, not directly. What she said was, I should have protected you better. I should have asked more questions. I should have been your mother first and his wife second. I told her I appreciated her saying it. I told her I needed more time. She said she understood. We have spoken 6 times since then. It is not what a mother and daughter should be. It may never be. But it is something, and I have learned in the places I have served that something is not nothing, and you build forward with what you have. Marcus will be eligible for parole in 4 years. I do not think about him much. When I do, it is not with the rage I expected to feel. It is something closer to a profound and exhausted sadness for what he chose to become when he had every opportunity to become something better. My father has not contacted me. I do not expect him to. The medal is on the wall of my apartment now. It is the first thing I hung when I moved in. Not out of vanity, but because I needed a reminder every morning that there is a version of honor that is real, that is earned in the dark, that no courtroom can give you and no family can take away. I earned that medal in the dust and the heat and the silence. I earned what came after it in the hardest room I have ever sat in, which was not a war zone. It was a courtroom in Maryland, 7 rows from the man who raised me, watching the truth come out one document at a time. My name is Lisa Carter. I came home a soldier. I left that courtroom something more. I left it free.